Mr. Poggia, thank you very much, and a huge thank you to the Canton of Geneva for the support that you provide us and for making organizations like MMV able to flourish in this environment. Now, I'm going to give a brief presentation that will touch on MMV's strategy. It will also focus on some of the past 20 years, but also will give a forward look to the future. And I wanted to begin with just giving a perspective of when I entered MMV in January of 2011, and one of my first duties was a trip to Ethiopia to attend a meeting of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance. And I was fortunate enough to go into a rural health clinic in a village in Ethiopia where I met this young girl. And her name is Zakia, and she'd been brought in with both malnutrition and also with malaria. But she'd been cured through one of MMV's partnership drugs. And it made me realize just how successful my predecessors had been and really how thankful of what they'd achieved at MMV, but also determined that we would carry this forward as I took over the organization at that point. Now, if we go back to 1999 and look at the words of Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the Director General of the WHO at that time, you can see that MMV was developed as a new mechanism to solve a pressing issue, and that was one of market failure in malaria and the neglected tropical diseases. We were formed with a very focused mission, and that was to discover, develop, and deliver new anti-malaria products to both cure and protect, and then later the focus began to emerge with the ultimate view of eradication. And we've just prepared these charts for you to just show some of the development over time. And there's 6 different lenses you can look at MMV through, but one of the key things is that that portfolio developed from 6 molecules in 1999 to 10 to 55 projects today. And what's really important is, as you've heard, there's 11 launched drugs. And you can see through a lot of the other lenses the development of the organization over time. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that our organization has grown through to around 100 people. And it looks as though this has just been in step with a lot of the other activities. But behind this, there's actually some key milestones that have occurred. And one of those, now can we go on to the next slide? Thanks. One of them is captured in this quote from George Jago, and that is that we were discovering and developing compounds, but those compounds don't translate into medicines until they actually get to the patients that need them. And this really required that in 2007 we built an access and product management team within the organization to support the launch of the products that were coming through. And the first of those was Coatem Dispersible in 2009. So you can see the many obstacles on the pathway to a patient, but at the same time we also then look back at R&D. And what was happening at that time is we were beginning to get more molecules coming from academia without industry partners. And so MMV actually had to build up a lot of the competencies of drug development. So effectively, we were able to intervene at any point in the value chain. And this has been absolutely critical moving forward because we've been bringing those molecules through from academic partners and transitioning to industry partners. At the same time, we've been also working with different types of industry partners that actually may lack malaria experience or certain elements of drug development experience. And so we've been able to step in and complement those. And this has been absolutely critical to establishing that portfolio of 55 products. Now, as you heard last night, there are now products available, 11 of them, that are saving lives today. And you can see here represented some of those products and just the vast numbers of treatments that have been shipped, hundreds of millions, and these are having a profound impact. And you heard from the chairman of our board, Per Wold-Olsen, last night about one of those, Alexandria, but there's another 2.2 million of them. And at this point, I want to stop and say thank you, because this is your work. And this is a tremendous achievement. But we all know that there is a lot to do. And over the last several months, two reports have been released on eradication, one by a WHO advisory group and the other by the Lancet Commission. These reports both are remarkably similar and underscore the feasibility of eradication, and I think some of it's nicely captured in these words from the WHO report, and that is that no barriers, biological or environmental, to elimination and eradication exist, and effectively it's up to us. Now, what both reports do indicate is that in order to achieve this, we are going to need new tools. So there are 3 lines on this graph, and I've stolen it from the Lancet Commission report and just simplified it a little. But the top line is global trends, and actually that's an optimistic view, because with increasing resistance, those trends may not quite be as ambitious. The next is with enhanced access. But finally, if we can achieve enhanced access and with new tools, we can drive towards eradication. So the question for all of us, and this is the strategy, is, so how are we going to help bend the curve? And that's the key question that our strategy needs to answer. And there are 6 strategic levers here. The first is we've got drugs that work today, and it's increasing the impact of those drugs. Twofold. One, increasing access, and secondly, by life cycle management activities to ensure that they get to broader populations, such as very young children, women of childbearing potential, and pregnant women. The second is medicines to address resistance. The third is medicines that will facilitate elimination by providing post-treatment protection, also by providing new attributes, such as transmission blocking, to reduce prevalence. Once we begin to get traction and eliminate in countries, then we need to prevent malaria from coming back, and that's where chemoprophylaxis has a role. But as the WHO strategy says, moving forward, this can't be a one-size-fits-all, and we need data to tailor the malaria programs, and this is where groups like the US President's Malaria Initiative, the Gates Foundation, together with the Global Fund, are looking at how we can get access to real-time data to refine those projects rapidly so we can make maximal progress with the resources that we've got. And finally, we need to continue to strengthen partnerships, and we need to build capacity. And one of the things you'll hear about during the course of the meeting today is that it is not going to be my generation that will end malaria. So we need to make sure that the next generation of scientists and leaders is in place. So I want to finish this brief introduction with a photo. And this is a young woman, 10 years old, Millicent. Millicent, when she was an infant, was one of the first patients treated by coartem dispersible as part of a clinical trial. And you can see her here today thriving. And that is the magic of what we can achieve. So I'd like to thank you all. And at this point, I'd like to transition into a brief 6-minute video about MMV before going on to the next segment of today's proceedings. Thank you.
As the 20th century drew to a close, 1.5 million people were dying from malaria each year. A child under 5 was dying every 30 seconds. The drug pipeline was virtually empty, and resistance was rendering the active antimalarials obsolete. An incredible unmet need. This was the drive, focus, and reason for the founding of MMV. As we stepped into the new millennium, little did we know that 20 years later, along with committed donor support, we'd have a network of over 400 partner organizations that helped fill the malaria drug pipeline and brought forward 11 new antimalarials. As a result, we've helped save over 2 million lives. As the world looked forward with hope and the MDGs established a shared global responsibility, our first pioneering alliance bridged industry and academia, laying the foundations for the innovative partnerships to come. In 2001, with partner Shin Pung, we set out to develop a novel high-quality ACT, Piramax, to combat drug resistance. Bitter pills are not suitable for children, so together with Novartis, we addressed this unmet need with a flavored formulation of the first fixed-dose ACT, Coartem. We initiated the screening of pharma partners' chemical libraries, looking for promising compounds, and our portfolio grew and grew, with more drugs in development for both uncomplicated and severe malaria. In 2009, a year ahead of schedule, we launched our first product in partnership with Novartis, a pioneering child-friendly formulation. After almost a decade of research, we broadened the focus to include relapsing malaria, and in collaboration with GSK, co-developed a simpler therapy for the millions at risk. All the while, our network grew and our partnerships added to the global share of knowledge. Our translational science platforms have catalyzed over 30 novel drug candidates, and we continue to innovate with new integrated models that accelerate drug development. Building on studies that showed injectable artesunate was the most effective treatment for severe malaria, we collaboratively produced evidence to improve uptake of the drug in challenging settings. We also turned our attention to repurposing existing therapies to protect children from malaria. Between 2013 and 2019, 350 million courses of seasonal malaria chemoprevention were distributed. Anything is possible with the power of partnerships. Our co-developed novel drugs have contributed to the impressive outcomes of Millennium Development Goal 6C. And in 2016, we closely aligned ourselves with renewed global efforts to end malaria epidemics. The first new single-dose therapy for relapsing malaria in over 60 years, tafenoquine, was approved by the US FDA and Australian TGA. Testament to the 10 years of dedicated collaboration between MMV and GSK. As we step into the next 20 years, we are committed to innovate and deliver products that improve outcomes and provide a continuum of care. Our screening projects continue to identify promising new molecules and maintain a healthy drug pipeline. But malaria is a challenging disease. Despite the phenomenal success of the last 20 years, more than 400,000 people still die of malaria each year. With passion, collaboration, and innovation, we are now closer to the malaria-free world that we all dream of. Our combined efforts have saved over 2 million lives. If this is what we can do today, imagine what we can achieve tomorrow.
So with that vision, I'd like to continue now with the rest of the program, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Joan Herbert, who's a Senior Director of Business Development at MMV. And Joan is going to lead us through something of an unusual session that's really intended to highlight our partners and some of the key achievements that those partners have made, because ultimately we are nothing without our partners, because we are all MMV. So thank you, Joan.